Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are going to be talking about stopping payments due to death. Before we dive too much into the video, I just want to say make sure that you watch the video from start to finish so that you don't miss a detail that might pertain to you, especially in a situation like this where you're dealing with the passing of more than likely a family member. You want to make sure that everything is handled properly. All right, so here we are back at SSA.gov, and specifically we're looking at policy number GN20602.050, reports of death. So if you were to go to Google and you were to type this in right here, this policy is going to come up. When I looked it up, I typed in like SSA death procedure POM, right? POM would be this policy operating manual. And this came up, so this pretty much tells you what you would need to know, but we'll go over it now. So first off, we're actually going to scroll down a little bit and we're going to talk about the reports of death and the difference between reports of death and the proof of death. A report of death is essentially an allegation by an individual or a third party that somebody has passed away with no significant proof like a death certificate or any forms that might be needed in order to update a record, right? So anybody at any time can make an allegation that somebody has passed away and Social Security will suspend the record, preventing any further payment from going out. Once they have the proof, which is up here, and this is listed first because this is kind of like the primary information needed. Once they have the proof, then the record would go from a suspended status to a terminated status. The reason why I'm making this video is because in my experience, I've seen a number of people either talk about this over the phone while I worked at Social Security or in person. But I've seen a lot of people online or on Facebook talk about this issue as well. And they'll phrase it in the way where they're saying, I'm going to wait to contact Social Security until I get a death certificate. Because they assume that they need that death certificate to prove to Social Security that the person's passed away. And where they're not wrong, that's not necessarily the only proof that can be taken. So we'll dive right into this this next bit here, which is the proof of death. So you can see right here, Section B, there's a number of proofs that Social Security can accept to update a record and make sure that the benefits are terminated. They can take a death certificate, but usually what ends up happening is the funeral home or maybe the county is going to update the electronic death record. Or they'll send in SSA 721, which is basically a form of notification of death. So you have the person's name, their Social Security number, their date of birth, and their date of death. Right? So that's essentially what's needed. But again, if you're waiting on the death certificate, depending on the state you're living in and the population and how many people have passed away in order to get that certificate, it could take, I would say, on average between maybe 4 to 8 weeks to get a death certificate. And if you're in a situation where you need that Social Security payment ASAP, just know that you don't have to wait for the death certificate. The most common way that Social Security is notified and updates a record of somebody's passing is through the local funeral home. So you realistically are going to be dealing with the local funeral home, I would say, within a couple days of the person passing away, if not the same day. And once they have all the documentation they need, they're either going to mail or fax over Form SSA 721, which I'd say is probably the most common way that the funeral home is going to be in touch with Social Security, or they're going to update the electronic death record or death registration report with the person's passing. So basically what happens there is once Social Security has either the SSA 721 or they get the alert from the EDR, there's going to be a customer service representative that's going to go in and they're going to do an input that will update the 3 records that Social Security maintains. So if you didn't know, there's 3 separate records. There's what's on your Social Security card, which includes your name and any names that you use. So if you've been married and you've changed your name due to marriage, it would show all your name changes. So that includes your names, obviously your date of birth, where you were born, your mother's full maiden name, so your mother's name at birth as well, and then your father's name, and then on the last record that gets updated with this, it would also have your date of death there as well. So that's the first record. The second record is going to be essentially your benefit record. For obvious reasons, if you're receiving Social Security benefits, it's going to have your name, your address, your bank information, all your contact information, like your bank information, your telephone number, your date of birth. Obviously, for benefit reasons, your date of birth is important. And then once the customer service representative does the input, it's going to have your date of death in there. So for any next of kin or surviving spouses or divorced spouses that go, that might be eligible under your record, they'll be able to file as a survivor, and everything will go smoothly that way. And then the third record that they maintain is the Medicare query. So this is self-explanatory. Anything to do with Medicare. So, while you're alive and receiving benefits, there's a Medicare query that shows your name, what record you draw Medicare benefits from. So whether it's you under your own retirement record, or maybe you were already drawing as a surviving spouse, or maybe a divorced spouse, something like that. Then it would show kind of the Social Security number that you're drawing under, as well as your date of birth. And then once you pass, your date of death will be on there as well. It's important to note that whenever somebody passes away, one thing that you do want to do is ensure that the proper date of death is on there. I know that might make you scratch your head, but sometimes what will happen is especially in most cases, dealing with an elderly person. So let's say they're in their late 70s, early 80s, and they're real frail. Maybe they slipped and fell and had to go to a rehab facility or something. When that person leaves a rehab facility, on a lot of the medical paperwork, you're going to have an intake date and a discharge date. And how the discharge date is abbreviated is DOD, right? Date of discharge. And then let's say that person goes home, again, assuming, let's say that they broke a hip, right? That's a pretty catastrophic injury for even a younger person, but for an older person, it's very bad, and it's usually unlikely that the person will survive a broken hip if they're elderly. So what can happen is sometimes on the paperwork, there'll be a mix-up where they'll look at DOD thinking it's date of death and it's date of discharge. So the person, let's use today as an example. Let's say that they got discharged on February 19th, right, as the date of discharge, and then maybe they went home and passed away a couple days later on the 21st, right? So the DOD should be 2/21, not 2/19. So you just want to ensure the correct date of death is on there. It's not so much, it's not as important if the person passes in the middle of the month, but if you're dealing with a situation where, let's say, it's between the last day of the month and the first day of the new month, because now you're talking about another month of entitlement to whatever benefits they were receiving, that's really when it becomes super important. And then also, to prevent any mix-ups with any Medicare billing issues or something like that, that's another reason to do it as well, because especially with assisted living facilities or senior living, rehab facilities, things like that, when they go to run a bill, they might have a hiccup, and then usually it's the person in the office that's doing all of that. They'll realize that that mistake is made, and they'll reach out to the Social Security office. But again, it's always good, especially if you're that family member, just make sure that everything is correct on the record before kind of moving forward. The next thing that happens, so once the funeral home sends over all that information, let's assume that the record gets updated properly, good to go with all the right dates. There'll be, a lot of times, there'll be a systems-generated letter that comes in the mail basically saying, we're sorry to learn of the loss of this person. If there's anybody, that's a surviving spouse or a minor child or a disabled child, please get in touch with the local Social Security office to pursue a claim for benefits, or at least see if you're eligible. That should be the next thing that comes. And then if there is, let's say, the situation that we just talked about, where let's say that the person lived until the first of the following month. Again, Social Security pays a month behind for anybody that didn't know. So if you were to pass away on, let me see here, let me pull up the calendar. Computer froze. There we go. Okay, So in order to be due a payment, you essentially have to live for the entire calendar month. So that means that if you were to pass away at 11:59 on the last day of whatever month, you are not due a payment in the next month. But if you were to pass away at, let's say, 12 o'clock on the dot, 12 a.m. on the first day of the month, and you normally got paid on, let's say, the second Wednesday, right? So let's say that you passed away or your family member passed away at 12 a.m. on Wednesday, March 1st, and they normally got paid on March 8th, this check on March 8th would still be due even if they terminated the record. So aside from the letter that the system-generated letter that you would have gotten from Social Security, the payment center eventually should be mailing a letter out to the address on file that basically says, it appears that such and such passed away and that there's still a payment due. The record, this would be the case if the record, let's say, again, they passed away on the 1st, and then the record gets updated by the funeral home sends over everything, and the local office updates the record on the 2nd and terminates all the benefits before the pay date on the 8th. Then the payment center should be sending a letter to whatever address is on file saying this person was still due a payment and it can be paid to a specific group of people. Like, again, a surviving spouse is going to be at the top of that list. If there's no surviving spouse, then any minor children would be second. And then there's a priority list of like 6 or 7 people. I forget the correct order that it goes in, but that would essentially be the order. Please fill out this form and mail it back in this specific envelope, which the envelope is going to go right to the payment center, back to them. And then whatever you put on there, they might give you a call, and then they'll give you the payment of whatever was due. Is essentially how that would work. And then from there, realistically, the last thing that comes into play would be the 1099. So if you're the person that's kind of closing out the estate or all the taxes, things like particularly taxes, then there'll be a 1099 that you'll need to request in the new year to complete that person's taxes. And normally if the person's still alive, that's going to be mailed out automatically, but the system is sophisticated enough to know that there's this person is deceased and not to send out the 1099. So if you're the family member or the friend or the executor of the estate, whatever you might be, you'll have to contact the local Social Security office and basically say, hey, this person passed away last year. They were paid Social Security benefits. I need the 1099 to close out their final tax return. And then from that point, that will realistically be it as far as that procedure goes. So I hope you, if you're watching this video, I certainly hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope that this helps clear up any questions you might have had in this issue if you're dealing with a family member or a spouse or something like that in this particular situation. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to give it a like. It does help out the algorithm on the channel and spread the video out to other people who are looking for the same information. If you had any questions about anything that I talked about, please leave a comment down below, and I'll be sure to reply as soon as possible. And then please consider subscribing to the channel and turning your bell notifications so that you're always notified whenever I'm posting new content. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic day.